The Green Bay Packers stink in the first half offensively. But you know who's worse? The Pittsburgh Steelers. If there's a week to buck that trend for Green Bay's offense, this is the one. Plus, our pal Zhao joins us to talk about a win over the Rams, plus look forward to this marquee matchup with the Pittsburgh Steelers to see if the Packers can build something moving forward. All that on today's show. Let's do it.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast to iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts, you'll find Locked On Packers, the #1 Packers podcast on the internet, and the show for fans who know what happened. They want to know why and how. Thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. We hope you like starting your day with us as much as we like starting our day with you. And today's episode of Locked On Packers is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first ticket purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Zhao on the show today. We will talk with her in just a second. The Pittsburgh Steelers, offensively, are basically like if the Packers, who are terrible in the first half, were also terrible in the third quarter. And I had a follower who pointed it out on Twitter that basically the Steelers this year have been the Packers against the Saints, but every week. Terrible for 3 quarters and then gangbusters in the fourth quarter. Now, that is, I'll say that's like partially true. It's a good bit in terms of the comparison and putting it in a way that I think makes sense. But the weird thing is they're winning these games by playing really well in the fourth quarter, but not as well as the Packers in the second half. So that doesn't make sense. The math doesn't work. They're worse in the first half than the Packers and only good in the fourth quarter, but not as good as the Packers are in the second half. Just to give you a little bit of context with the numbers, the Steelers offense is 26th in EPA per play and 27th in success rate overall. That's overall. So overall, this is a bad offense, like a materially worse offense than Green Bay in the aggregate. But in the fourth quarter, they're 8th in EPA per play and 4th in success rate. So they're suddenly a top 10 offense. But if we just take the first half piece of this, the Packers, 28th in EPA per play, 29th in success rate. Bad. The Steelers are worse in both categories. 30th in EPA per play, 31st in success rate. The Packers in the second halves of these games, 3rd in EPA per play, much better than the Steelers. 4th in success rate, 2nd in EPA per play, 4th in dropback success rate. Yes, in total, in the second half, the Steelers are a top half of the league offense, but they're not as good as the Packers. The difference is their defense. It's significantly better overall, first quarter through fourth quarter, than the Packers. Still, their offense has been so bad for most of all of these games that they have had to win one-score games in the fourth quarter. It is not sustainable. That doesn't mean that they're not a good team overall. I actually think if you look at some of the underlying numbers, like Football Outsiders has them as an above-average team, but adjusting for schedule. They've played a tough schedule. They've won some real games against some real teams. But if you flipped every one-score game on their schedule the other way, they'd be 0-8. Their 5 wins all came on one scores, and their 3 losses were all more than one score. That is not the hallmark of a good team. Now, the Packers, if you flipped all their one-score games, they'd add 2 wins. When you look at the difference between these two teams, offensively, the Packers are better, and defensively, the Steelers are better. The question is, how much and when? I think most importantly, when. So the Packers have started slow in these games. The Steelers have started slow as well, but the Steelers' defense has gotten them back in games with turnovers, with their own scoring. This is one of those games that could certainly be played in that like 13-10, 17-14, 20-17 kind of range. Every Steelers game seems to be played in that range because this defense is good, especially their front. They get after you with their pass rush. TJ Watt, Cam Hayward, Alex Highsmith, they are coming. Minkah Fitzpatrick, we don't know if he's going to play the corners though. You can attack them. You can attack these corners. They're pretty good. They're pretty good against number one receivers, and they're a good passing defense overall. Pretty good against number one receivers. But against wide receiver 2s and wide receiver 3s, 23rd in DVOA against wide receiver 2s and 25th against wide receiver 3s. Here's the reason. Joey Porter Jr. has been really good this year. But there have been 128 corners this year to take 80 coverage snaps. 128. That's a lot. That's a lot. That's like 4 a team. After Joey Porter Jr., who again, really good young player. Awesome to see Joey Porter's son in a Pittsburgh Steelers uniform balling. Okay, 128 corners. Patrick Peterson, that guy's still out there. 97th in coverage grade by Pro Football Focus. 97th out of 128. Levi Wallace is 104 out of 128. And Chandon Sullivan, yes, Chandon Sullivan is 118 out of 128 in coverage grade. This is a below average cornerback group. Now, I don't know if they're going to approach the Steelers the same way that they approach the Rams. I do think there's some overlap there, especially if Minkah Fitzpatrick can't play. You want to make these inside linebackers move and cover in space. And the Packers said against the Rams, we're going to keep you in base all day long. 21 personnel, 12 personnel, 22 personnel, 13, just weird stuff. And say, not only are we going to run it effectively against you, but when we throw it, we're going to make your linebackers cover and move. And what the Rams did is they condensed the middle of the field. They said, okay, we're going to drop our linebackers. We're not going to drop them wide. We're going to drop them in the middle, and you're not going to throw over the middle on us. Thank you very much. And so what did the Packers do? They attacked this Rams team on the edges. These zone coverages, you clear out a side and you sneak a tight end in on a corner or a cross-country route where you're just like deep overs and it's over, and you're trying to widen these teams. Those are the kinds of plays that they made work against the Rams. Now, the Steelers don't play that same style of defense. So what is the counter going to be? We'll see. It's something we'll talk about tomorrow with Chris Carter on our Locked On Packers and Locked On Steelers crossover. But scoring early in this game would be particularly valuable given the ineptitude of the Pittsburgh Steelers in those same moments. So that means a couple things. You don't have to score to be ahead in this game. Now, you literally have to score. But I mean, to be ahead of the game, don't turn the ball over. Don't turn the ball over. I think the rainy conditions last week affected some of the fumble stuff. Jordan Love threw the ball pretty well in those wet conditions. So if you get wet, cold conditions in Pittsburgh this weekend, you've had some experience with this particular group in that regard, right? So, okay. Now, if you can get those turnovers down, don't have the turnovers. You don't need to really score that many points to feel like you have a good chance to have a lead at, let's say, halftime. Now, the Packers defense, not giving up big plays, that's what they want to do. That's where they want to live on defense. They have the corners to match up with its Pittsburgh offense, in part because Kenny Pickett is just not very good. And their front is playing really well. They can rush. And this Steelers offensive line, they're not moving bodies in the run game. The Packers are. They're being disruptive. So I like this matchup from a Packers defense standpoint. I don't like this matchup from a Packers offense standpoint. So if you can come out early, scripted plays like they did last week, if you got this game plan right, Matt LaFleur, and you can jump out to a 7-0 lead, a 10-0 lead. No, the Steelers aren't going to knuckle under. But they're also probably not going to match you early on. It's just not been who they have been all season. Then you have to hold on for dear life in the fourth quarter because that's when Kenny Pickett and this offense has apparently been coming alive. If they can start fast, you give yourself the best opportunity to win. And that's true in almost every game. But like, you start fast against the Lions, they can hang with you. It's not enough. It might be not quite enough in terms of like they can just win the game in the first half. But you can really put yourself ahead of the game more than against most teams by scoring early in this game. If they can have their best offensive first half of the season, if they can flip the script even and say, hey, instead of scoring 17 in the second half, 17 in the first half, it could literally be 17-3 at halftime then. That's how this Pittsburgh Steelers season has gone. And then you've given yourself this terrific opportunity to go win a football game. If this is 3-3 at halftime, you're playing the style that the Steelers want to play. It's the style that has also worked to a point for you in this season. But the Steelers have been better at it. They've also been luckier at it. But they have the best group on the field. The best group on the field on Sunday is going to be the Pittsburgh Steelers defense, regardless of whether or not Minkah Fitzpatrick plays. So if you can steal a little bit of time in the first half, steal a little bit of third and fourth quarter offensive magic, put it in the first quarter. Just be the, whatever they are in EPA per play right now, like 16th, 18th best offense over the course of the game rather than second half, first half. That might be the real balance that they need to go and win this game. All right, we're going to talk to our pal Lily Zhao a little bit more about the Rams game, some of the things that we can draw on with that and the things we can glean about that Packers team. All of that coming up in just a second here on Locked On Packers. I recently bought some Bucks tickets, Bucks Nets in Brooklyn. I have some family coming in from Europe, and they really wanted to go see Giannis and Dame. It is so overwhelming to buy tickets at times because you have so many options. You never really know what the prices are supposed to be. So Game Time tries to take the headache out of it for you. With killer last minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guaranteed. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. And it is so useful because you can feel confident that you're getting the best price. Plus, they have exclusive flash deals and sponsor deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And more. The Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section in row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Last minute tickets, the lowest price guaranteed. That's Game Time. And football season is here, and Locked On is kicking up our coverage with Locked On NFL Kickoff Live. Each Friday, Locked On will go live at 2 p.m. Eastern on every Locked On NFL YouTube channel. Host Anitra Batiste, Jarvis Davis, and Kyle Krabs will break down every game on the NFL slate to get you ready for your team's matchup, your fantasy lineups, your betting angles, and more. Plus, get the in-depth local analysis from our stable of NFL hosts across the country, people like me, who know these teams better than anyone else. Find Locked On NFL Kickoff Live every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern on your Locked On NFL YouTube channel. For the first time in what seems like forever, The Green Bay Packers got a win on Sunday, a 20-3 throttling of the LA Rams. It was not always the prettiest, both weather conditions and the football, but we have immaculate vibes here on Locked On Packers, and one of the reasons is we have our pal Lily Zhao from Fox 6 in Milwaukee now to answer a much more cheerful question this week. Lily, how you doing?
Peter, I'm doing well. I'm glad that I bring the exuberance, the energy, the excitement, because we're talking about a victory.
The juice, it was right there for you.
Oh, I know, the juice. I got to put like a coin in the coin jar. But yeah, I'm doing well. I'm happy that we're talking about a win and excited that, we're not talking about a fifth straight loss. So I'll take it. I'm doing well. How you doing?
I'm good. This is an unfamiliar place for us to be for a long time here covering the Packers, but it was hard to miss how much Aaron Jones impacted this offense. And I know they didn't score a bunch of points, but 391 yards. They go 1 for 4 in the red zone. That's not ideal, but this offense looked structurally much more like what we thought it was going to look. I want to frame it this way. If Aaron Jones had been healthy this season, how do you think it changes where they are right now?
I think it changes in some of those close games. In some of those games where they might have had that they had the ball, the final drive of the game, or potentially later in the game where they had a chance to win it. I think his presence maybe could help you win 1 or 2 of those games. That being said, it didn't happen. They couldn't win those games, but you have to think, what if, right? What if Aaron Jones had been healthy the entire way and he was just let loose? We could be talking about a different season record-wise thus far. But I will say this, though. Having him back this week on the field, let loose, being cut loose, as he said, it was kind of reminiscent to week 1, right? Against the Bears, where we're thinking, oh, this is great. The offense is really gelling well. They're playing well. It looks, everything looks good, but didn't happen when he was injured. But having him back against the Rams, they kind of got back to that week 1 status where they were able to put up some points. And it's crazy to say that in this game, they scored their first half touchdown since week 2, but they did it because of Aaron Jones. So it's good to have him back.
I'm right there with you. I think you have to think one of Denver, Las Vegas, or Atlanta could have gone differently if you have Aaron Jones, whether it's at the end of the Atlanta game, just get one more first down. That was really all they needed. Or in the Raiders game, on that last drive, maybe one play pops a little bit differently. Same with the Broncos. They had opportunities to win those games late. Maybe they don't need to win them late because they score an extra touchdown here or there. But then the defense has to get a stop. So that's its own complicating factor here. But then I think that brings us to these questions about evaluation. So like, if that's true, if we assume that's true, and they could be 4-4, even 5-3 with Aaron Jones on the field, how do you properly evaluate what we've seen to date? Because it does seem like things would have been different if you just had your horses here.
That's a good question, right? I mean, that's kind of the process that they're going through to evaluate Jordan Love, the other offensive players. And again, maybe Jordan Love, would get off to a better start. Maybe the first half offense looks a little bit better had he been healthy. Maybe that his presence on the field leads to better plays by the receivers and not drops and all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of this like trickle down effect of having him in your offense does this. Because he does this, the rest of the offense can do that, and that's play better. So maybe it would be, quote unquote, a little bit easier to evaluate where Jordan, where a couple of these younger guys on offense do stand if he had been in there. But, I think at this point, what you have is a team that was able to bounce back against an undermanned team. Now the question is, can they take what they learned against LA? Can they translate it to Pittsburgh and get a win against the Steelers team, which I think is going to be a really tough test for them? But in terms of the evaluation process, I think if Aaron Jones can stay healthy on the field and everybody else just plays a tick better, I think the true evaluation period, I would say, maybe starts on Sunday.
Yeah, and Lily, I think you made a point about, maybe the receivers don't drop as many passes with Aaron Jones on the field, and there are going to be people who are going to go, well, that's nonsense. That's not how that works. But there was a clip going around. Dontavian Wicks made a mistake, and Aaron Jones, he's got his head down, literally his head down. And Aaron Jones does the chin up, basically. The like, look at me. I'm going to pick you up, both metaphorically and physically. And it's just like having that guy on the field. It's one thing if he's on the sidelines and he's in street clothes. It's another thing to have him playing as well as he was on Sunday and also being like, hey man, we got this. Like, it does seem like there's a force multiplier effect here where just having him makes it easier for everyone else to say, let me just do my job and this can work. Whereas before I felt like guys felt the need to press. Felt the need to do it on their own. And maybe that's why they have wrong routes or things like that. Like, it just seems like having him on the field is a calming presence in a way that we saw the material impact of him being gone.
I think you brought up a great point there, Peter. Because I will say the other guy on the bench was Romeo Doubs. I talked with him yesterday about that moment. And, he talked about the leadership that Aaron Jones had, but most importantly, this is, Dontavian's young. He's learning. He's a rookie. Guys make mistakes, but how you bounce back is the big thing. And he said him coming to the bench, Aaron Jones coming to the bench, just to comfort him, just saying, we have your back. We're your teammates. Don't stress about it. You made one bad play. Go back out there and make some good ones. But to your point of having Aaron Jones on the field as a leader, he's really expounded on that role, being one of the lone veteran guys in that Packers locker room, and he's really taken onus of it this season. But I like what you brought up. He comes right up to Dontavian, puts his head on his helmet, and says, "I don't know what he said, but just hey man, I've got your back. We got this." I think just having that mere moment there with a veteran player, I think does so much versus, oh, you fumble, then you just go sit on the bench and no one talks to you, right? I think having a leader like that certainly helps. And I think maybe that will translate to better play from the receivers.
All right, we're going to get back to our friend Lily Zhao here in just a second on Locked On Packers. Whenever the game clock stops, it's time to order DoorDash. It is the best way for you to get sustenance, nutrients, because we all need that recharge and that hit on Sundays. The wings hit different on a Sunday. The burger, the slice of pizza. We do wings in our house on Sundays pretty regularly. And I usually don't want to leave. I usually don't want to leave the house because I've been locked on football all day. And so I need someone to bring it to me. It's a lot. You guys know football. It's a lot. So do it with DoorDash. They'll bring you whatever you need, from food from restaurants to groceries. You might need some groceries to make dinner. Say you want to make dinner. I like making dinner, but sometimes I forget something. DoorDash can bring it to you. When you use the code LOCK23, you'll get 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order when you download the DoorDash app. DoorDash is a staple in my house. If you don't have it, now is the perfect time. LOCKED23 is the promo code for a 50% off deal up to a $10 value on that first order when you download the DoorDash app and spend $15 or more, subject to change and terms do apply. Thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers your first listen every day. Every dayers tomorrow on the show. Our crossover Thursday gets you ready for Packers Steelers. It is two of the most storied franchises in the NFL. Chris Carter, one of my favorite people to talk football with, just to talk with on this network. So we're going to have a lot of fun tomorrow on Locked On Packers. I know that this is a little bit of a tortured metaphor and his dad is a military guy, but Aaron Jones is a foxhole guy. I want that guy next to me in the foxhole every day. And that's why, Lily, this was a really young team. They needed guys like David Bakhtiari and Aaron Jones to stay healthy because those are the stabilizing forces in their offense. That didn't happen. So maybe they can get on track here going forward. Do you see, at least offensively, we're going to talk about the defense in a second, but offensively, do you see as what they did on Sunday as, hey, they turned a corner, or this was a one-off?
I'm hoping they turned a corner. We can talk about the first half. They did play complimentary football. They still had those 7 penalties. But overall, I think what they were able to do,
two nonsense penalties. Let's be honest. The fourth
and
ones, that was absurd. But
yeah, so technically 6 good, not good, but 6 penalties. But
right.
I think their ability to cash in on the takeaways that the Packers defense gave them was an improvement, because I think we've seen in previous games the defense gives them a gift, they can't do anything with it, or they go 3 and out. So just that, in my opinion, was progress. That being said, can they do it against a better caliber team, that isn't playing Brett Rippon? No offense to Rippon, but I want to see them do it against better competition. I think this is a good.
To Rippon.
I want to see them do it against better competition, but I think this is a good step up for them in terms of what we saw. I think that last drive, or the last drive that they scored a touchdown, when Jordan hits Christian Watson for 37 yards and he scored with Luke, that's the offense we all think this team can have. So maybe that drive right there is what they can build upon when they play Pittsburgh.
Sometimes you just need a play or two. And Jordan Love talked about it after the game. He was like, we needed that. I needed that. And hopefully Christian needed that. And what I loved, Lily, was Christian Watson, I think, got 2 targets in that game. One was wildly underthrown on a play where he's open. He didn't sulk. He blocked his ass off all day. Some just incredible efforts on some of these plays. That kind of stuff, to me, that stuff matters. The culture stuff matters. And so I thought it was so rewarding for him to be paid off like, hey, go make a contested catch. He hadn't made a contested catch all year after being, by passer rating, the best guy in the league doing that last year. So I'm there. Just when I think I'm out, they're pulling me back in here a little bit. I have to be honest. Let's talk about Jordan Love. We've certainly been critical of some of the decision-making, some of the accuracy issues that he's had. What do you think was different for him in this one?
I think it was the supporting cast around him. Those guys made great catches in the second half. But we all see that when he's doing those short to intermediate throws, he's on the money. I think I don't know if it just gets in your head. I've never played the quarterback position, but maybe you're thinking, if I got to get this all in one throw and they can't connect, I don't know if that does anything to your confidence in terms of, I don't really want to sling it more than 15, 20 yards down the field, right? But I think that 37-yarder to Watson certainly paid off, boosted his confidence. But I think his ability in the short to intermediate passing game, I think, has improved tremendously. He just seems in control. He seems decisive. The throws have been very good. And of course, his receivers help him out and they catch the ball. I just think his decision-making, his ability to see the field, he didn't make any sort of mistakes outside of maybe 1 or 2 plays where he probably would have wanted back that were head scratchers. I think he played better football. He managed the game better. And I think that's the improvement we want to see from him, with everybody else kind of, taking another step forward as well. So I liked what I saw in the second half. Didn't blow you away by any means, but that's the progress we want to see from Jordan.
It doesn't have to blow you away. That's the thing. It's like when the running game is going the way that it is, just make a couple throws, and you had the big one to Dontavian Wicks on 3rd down. The outbreaker comes right back the next play and throws that corner route to Luke Musgrave. Like, that's good football, man. Like, that's what you want to see from Jordan Love. And they really attacked on the outside. Those are not easy throws. Some of those deep comebacks to Romeo Doubs, that's not easy to do. And so I liked seeing that from Jordan Love, but they've got a much stiffer test here coming up against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Before we get to the Pittsburgh part of this, if you're a cynic, or if you're a fan of like the Bears, the Vikings, or one of these other teams, you're going to say, look, it was Brett Rippon. Let's not get too excited about this defense. Are you excited about this defense? Are you going, actually, this was great, or let's pump the brakes a little bit on this?
I'm kind of half and half. I do believe if you played Matthew Stafford, there are troubles on 3rd down and long.
It looks different, probably. Yeah,
it looks different. But I will say this though, they did what they had to do against a backup quarterback. They held this team to 3 points. Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, those guys couldn't really get anything going. I think the rookies in the defensive backfield, they did really well. Anthony Johnson, Carrington Valentine, those guys certainly held their own. And of course, the pressure up front got to Rippon. So I think they did what they had to do. They were able to get takeaways. That being said, I feel like it'll be a better judge evaluation period when they do play better quarterbacks, because those 3rd and longs have certainly plagued them. Those 3rd down plays certainly plagued them, but they were able to get off the field against the Rams, who really were shorthanded. They couldn't run the football at all. So I still say this is a positive performance from this defense, because again, the offense had 2 back-to-back fumbles to start the second half, and that easily could have spiraled into the Rams score some points, but they were able to get them off the field and limit them to nothing. So I give them credit for that. And they kept this offense in the game. They gave them opportunities. So I like where the defense is at right now, and that's encouraging to say. But when they play the Chiefs, when they play the Chargers, can they get off the field? That'll be the big test.
Yeah. And, the Steelers have been in a lot of ways a mirror image of the Packers this season. They're like the Packers if the Packers also didn't play in the third quarter. Like the Steelers are this incredible fourth quarter team that for 3 quarters looks like absolute dog water. Like it doesn't make any sense. They still have this really good defense. And so I kind of don't know what to make of this team, Lily. Like when you watch the Steelers, like when we saw them last week against the Titans, it's like they should be losing this game. And by all rights, at the end, if Will Levis doesn't throw a horrific interception, like they probably should have lost that game, but they're 5-3 and they'd be in the playoffs if the playoffs started today. So what do you make of this Steelers team?
Confounding at points, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is a team that they could have 1 win. They could have, I don't know. It's so confusing how they have 5 wins, but I shouldn't say confusing. They've found ways to win, which is a sign of a good football team, right? You can be down.
I believe if you flipped every one of their 1-score games, they'd be 0-8.
Correct. Right. So it's who knows, but it's just, they have found ways to win, which I give Mike Tomlin, his team credit for, because they've just been able to pull out these games where you're thinking they won that game. So I think this is going to be an interesting game in Pittsburgh. I still think that the Steelers defense is going to be nasty. You have TJ Watt, who put me down, probably will get a sack or 2 on Sunday. It's coming. He's still a force to be reckoned with, but I still think the Packers have a chance. This is, they made an improvement against the Rams, but this is a Steelers team where if you can get them on their heels for 3 quarters, hopefully you can kind of hold them off in that 4th one.
Yeah, no big plays is really what you have to do against this Pittsburgh team because that's how they want to live. That is basically keyed every single second half run that they've made. It has been with really just like 1 big play or maybe 2, and all of a sudden that creates something for them. If don't you feel like if this were any team other than the Steelers or any coach other than Mike Tomlin, we'd just be going, this is total nonsense. Like what I did this with the Vikings last year. Like the Vikings were such frauds. And now, by the way, I think Kevin O'Connell's a good coach, but like he's not Mike Tomlin. I feel like if this were anyone but like the Steelers, maybe the Ravens, we'd just be going, this is total nonsense. It really says something, I think, about Mike Tomlin, that we're just like, no, this team they're just so tough, man. Like that seems right to me. Sense. I don't know.
Yeah. I agree. I totally agree with that.
It's just one of those funny things, and we'll see. This does seem like a litmus test, Lily. It's hard for me to think about that with Mike Tomlin and not think of what Robert Saleh said about this Packers team last year. Let's take them out to deep water. And that has just sort of been living rent-free in my head. I want this Packers team to prove to me that they're tougher than they were last year. And I love the point that you brought up, the sequence, 2 turnovers in the second half, and the Packers give up no points off those turnovers. That could have spiraled, and it didn't. And that is a sign of toughness. I know it's against a backup quarterback and all that stuff. But that to me, and the fact that they have fought back in these games, that gives me a little more hope that if the Steelers take the Packers to deep water, maybe they can at least tread some water. I don't know if they'll float, but they can like swim a little bit. I don't know.
I agree. And I think when you think of the Steelers as a team, you just think of tough, right? I don't know what it is. It's just Mike Tomlin, the Steel City, they're tough. But to your point there, I think if the Packers can show that same toughness, punch back, go blow for blow, I think that will be another big sign of improvement for this team. Whether they win or not, we'll see. But I think if they can make those improvements, hang in there and protect Jordan Love, and again, like you mentioned, stop the big plays, but more importantly, show resolve in situations that they face adversity, I think that's a good step for this team because, again, they are still young. They don't want to use that excuse, but that's the way we've been going this season, but let's hope for a win, Peter.
They're not young anymore. It's November. You got to be a veteran now. These rookies are not rookies anymore. Old. You're old now. You're old. As someone who's 15 years older than them, they're old now. Gosh. It's fine. Lily, we will. I'm not quite, but we'll talk. We'll talk to you next week. Hopefully, talking about a win again, 2 in a row. Has that happened this season? No. Well, okay. We'll talk about it later. All right. Thanks to Lily for joining the show. Always great to talk to her. Back tomorrow. Our Locked On Packers, Locked On Steelers crossover with Chris Carter. No, not that Chris Carter. Our Locked On Steelers host, Chris Carter. And we're going to have some fun. We always do with Chris. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts. Wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers, the #1 Packers podcast. And anytime you want to come hang out with us live on our YouTube page, you can do that. Subscribe over on Locked On Packers so you can stay Locked On Packers.